ADHD reWired, episode 460. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD reWired. Today's guest is Brittany Berger. Brittany is the founder of WorkBrighter.co, a digital media company and community that helps disabled, chronically ill, mentally ill, and neurodivergent creatives better balance between work, play, and rest so they can burn out less. She started WorkBrighter after 5 years working in a high-stress startup that prioritized hustle, growth, and scaling over health. As a multiply disabled human, her body eventually had enough of the constant burnout cycle. Now that she's escaped hustle culture, she spends her time helping others like her to find balance for themselves, advocating for disability justice, and dancing, always dancing. I love that. All right, Brittany, well, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, I'm actually really excited because I don't think we have really explicitly and directly addressed hustle culture sort of as a whole. We think we talked a bit about toxic productivity. And I know I've shared on the podcast, and part of this came from very early on with ADHD reWired when I got introduced to Brene Brown's work about this idea of letting go of productivity as a measure of our self-worth. So you experience this. I mean, you experience the stuff that they talked about in that book and other books where people talk about wearing, the 80 to 100-hour work week as like a badge of honor. And for you, like your body said no.
Yeah, I fought it for a really long time. Kind of my whole life, I was very much a workaholic, overachiever, type A personality type stuff. And I never rested. But looking back, I can see now that every few months, things would kind of fall apart somehow. Like I could only ever hold it together for a few months at a time. And then when I got into full-time work, I was working in tech and startups and already working 60 hours a week at that job. But then the cool thing to do was to also have a side hustle. So I blogged and I freelanced. A lot of it was just very unnecessary. Like I do want to recognize so many people side hustle because they need to. But no, I was doing it for like the glory of the productivity, for participating in kind of like the cult of entrepreneurship and hustle culture and all of that.
The cult of entrepreneurship. That's a phrase I have not heard before.
It's just the idea that everyone should have a side hustle. And then eventually it got to the point where I was so burnt out and so sick that I did need to keep side hustling because my medical bills were so high. And eventually I just kind of got to the point where I realized I felt like I was working to make money to pay bills that came up because I was working so much. And it was just kind of this endless cycle that was feeding itself. And it was like, I kept saying that I needed to work so much to pay my medical bills, but then I kind of realized maybe if I rested and listened to my body just a little bit, maybe the medical bills wouldn't be so high.
So what'd you do?
I fought with that decision for a while, but after about 6 months of, wrestling with it and a lot of like my partner and my family really urging me to make changes, I did decide to leave my full-time job, really devote myself to healing myself. And I kind of made the conscious decision to keep my business, like this side hustle mentality, kind of like, when it was a side hustle, I was working on it, 10 to 15 hours per week. And I said, I am going to treat healing and getting healthy and dealing with all of this stuff in my life as my full-time job. And that will remain my side hustle. Again, I'm in a place of financial privilege where my partner is full-time employed. So I was able to do that. So I was blogging about productivity at the time and how just to be more productive. And so that kind of morphed into more talking about our relationship with productivity as a culture and as a society. And it's kind of morphed into what WorkWriter is now.
After you made that decision and you started sort of creating the life that you were wanting to transition towards, and that was beginning for you, how are you feeling about that? And what was your inner dialogue kind of like?
I was going through an identity crisis. I mean, I think the fact that I talk about, I was saying healing with my full-time job shows how much of a workaholic I still was, because like I couldn't picture not having a full-time job.
You even made healing work.
Yeah, exactly. But like for me, that was the way to get it done. Like I had to be like my type A perfectionist self about unlearning perfectionism.
I relate so much to that.
But like it worked. And it's like if I had tried to like if I had tried not to like trick myself like this, it probably would have been harder. Like I say, one of the best things that I did for my mental health was like shifting the tasks that are in my Todoist application from just work to like work and health. When I put drinking water and taking my meds in there, like that was the first time in my life I took my meds consistently. It was because of technically a productivity tool, but it's because I was using it for something other than work and productivity for once.
So you left your job in 2017?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been about 5 years. How long did it take for maybe some of the inner dialogue to really kind of understand that this is the new normal and to kind of accept the not hustle culture? Or maybe that's still a work in progress?
I mean, I'm still dealing with it. I journal morning pages, and it's so funny how almost every day it's just about my work. And it's kind of funny how every day, every entry starts off like, oh, yesterday wasn't productive enough, but then ends like, oh, yesterday was actually a very good day. And so it's still something that I struggle with on almost an everyday basis, but it's something that I'm more aware of, at least when it's happening. But yeah, it's definitely been a very long journey, especially since I'm still in a society that prizes productivity over most other things. It's definitely hard, but like, I feel like I have the tools to combat it now.
Yeah, it's funny as we're talking here, I was, cause right now I'm in the midst of doing my yearly planning. It takes me about a month or so to really do the whole process. So I always create like a big mind map and different domains. And usually the mind map, it starts with work, and that's like half the mind map. And then there's like everything else. What I just realized, because I'm still in the midst of it, I haven't even touched the work domain yet in my mind map. So to me, like that's actually progress.
Yeah, it definitely is, because it's, in your head, life came before work.
Yeah. So tell me about why you started this company, WorkWriter, and what's it about.
Yeah. So it originally started as just kind of my exploration of different productivity tactics, because I found a lot that kind of the traditional things like eat the frog or, do 4 hours of deep work at a time just really didn't work for me. And it was just kind of exploring about that. And I hadn't yet put together that the reason all of these traditional tactics didn't work for me was because of my disability and neurodivergence. So looking back at some of the old copy and newsletters and stuff from the time, it's so funny. I talk about like having to trick my brain into doing things and just having to go about things like so roundabout and working with my brain and not against it and stuff like that. And it's just so obvious. And I knew I had ADHD at the time, but I still didn't connect the dots yet. But I was recognizing how much hustle culture was feeding into kind of my own mindset that, the reason for a lot of my work was just kind of status and identity. And I was also learning that the expectations of hustle culture, if you're disabled, you can't meet them. I was increasingly starting to identify that way. And this was also when I started noticing other people talking and writing more about burnout and hustle culture. For example, the NAP ministry talking about how hustle culture and glorifying sleep deprivation is racist. And other people were talking about how the current hustle culture is anti-feminist. And I was like, could it be hustle culture is bad for everyone? And then the dots started coming together and I started tracing the roots, and it just kind of became a special interest.
So you were diagnosed with ADHD when?
When I was in college. And it wasn't even like something I was pursuing. I was just seeing mental health professionals for other issues. And they were like, why don't we try this? And yeah, I like barely got through college until I was on meds. But then right after college, I had a surgery, and it was the kind of thing where you had to stop all meds beforehand. And I just forgot about the meds afterwards. And then I eventually forgot that I was diagnosed with ADHD at all, which might be the most ADHD thing.
It's like one of those it's like a meme. You know your ADHD when?
You forget you have it for 10 years.
It is amazing how many times I have heard people say that they've been diagnosed like 2 or 3 times because they forgot the first or second time that they were diagnosed.
Yeah.
So it's not an uncommon story. Now, you've also been exploring an autism diagnosis.
Yes, exactly. And that is something else that has kind of been something in the back of my mind for a while. Growing up, I had a lot of issues with like sensory stuff, food and socializing. And back then, it was called Asperger's. That was brought up, but I was never officially diagnosed. But like I had all these different like things, like what's now known as ARFID, that, I would have doctors tell me like, oh, only autistic or Asperger's people have this. And I'd be like, so what does that mean for me? Avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder. It's basically like extremely picky eating, but like more than that, because like my whole body starts shaking and I start gagging just when I eat a food I don't really like. Yeah. So it's like kind of one of the lesser known eating disorders.
Okay. Well, I just learned something new. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I often think about is, when you have ADHD or, you're neurodivergent, that we don't really have the luxury of just doing like the 9 to 5 or a job that does not fit who we are. Right. I think that's one of the superpowers that neurotypical people have is they can do that. Good for them. If that works for them. Yeah. Like I know that myself and kind of everyone in my community, like if the environment you are not in is making you kind of swim upstream all the time, that is not sustainable.
Yeah. And that is just like what my whole life was up until 2017, pretty much.
And I think when we think about the sort of the mental health of, people like you and me and all of the listeners, in some ways, I think we can almost be looked at as the canary in the coal mine for society. If we are not doing well, right? Like that means like other people are also being really taxed, but like they have that spare executive function to kind of cope with it. But there's a cost to that too. Yeah, right?
Exactly.
There's a couple of things that I wanted to kind of explore with you. So when I was reading your sort of bio, your intro, you identified as a multiply disabled human. Right. So what's interesting to me is, and this is something that I think kind of recently I've been shifting my perspective on. So in my schooling, in my training, it's sort of drilled into us person first language, a person with ADHD, a person with disabilities. And even then, I saw in the ADHD community, there was sort of like a split camp, like either you're an ADHD or you're a person with ADHD. And typically both camps felt very strongly about their perspective, right? I've been shifting a lot, I think, the onus, because I think that ADHD, it's not necessarily part of who I am. It's like, I think we were saying before we started recording, like it's our operating system. When you're neurodivergent, like you see the world through that lens.
Yeah, exactly. I can't separate it from myself. And it's not all that I am, but it's also inseparable from that. I have so many things. Like I also have chronic illness. I also have something that's like not officially have a name with my ankle, but like my ankle is full of nuts and bolts and screws. Like it's just, if I had to say person with and then list all the things, I would be here talking forever. And so it's just easy to just find 3 words.
That makes sense. Have you found support? Like, are you in like the chronic illness community as well? Because I know that's a pretty supportive community. That was
actually a huge part of this whole transition that I probably should have mentioned earlier. One of the things that really helped me in deciding to leave my job in 2017 was seeing a therapist who specialized in chronic illness. And I just saw her for about a month because I was about to lose my insurance, but she really helped me create a long-term plan. So being honest with her, that I was like, listen, I can be here for a month. Can you? Yeah. And so she just kind of helped me create like kind of a self-awareness plan for myself almost. But that was really important. And that she taught me about spoon theory. And so then I shortly found, all of the spoon theory stuff online. And yeah, it was just really life-changing for me to realize, because again, like I've been dealing with ankle problems since I was 15. I spent my first birthday in the hospital having stomach surgery. I have dealt with this stuff my whole life, but up until I found other chronically ill people and disabled people online, I never identified as disabled. I never would have seen myself that way.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about this hustle culture and some productivity strategies as well. Because we do actually want to be productive, but that's not who we want to be as a person. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from ADHD Rewired's award-winning coaching and accountability groups at coachingrewired.com. So if you're done with feeling overwhelmed and want to launch into the new year with new and shiny tools made for your ADHD brain so you can live with intention and create actionable steps to finally get started on the things that matter to you, then this is the group that you've been looking for. Registration for our winter season is happening now. Make the investment in yourself to start the new year by starting with you. By joining us for our next registration event on Wednesday, December 21st at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. That's tomorrow, December 21st at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll also have 2 more registration events next week on Wednesday, December 28th and Thursday, December 29th, both at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So mark your calendars and go to coachingrewired.com to start your pre-registration process to secure your spot for our next season of coaching and accountability groups.
When this coaching group came up, I had just moved out of my house. I was a mess, like a hot mess.
Before this group, I worried a lot about being perceived as too needy.
Prior to this group, my definition of success definitely had a lot to do with how other people perceived things I was doing or had done, and if they deemed them successful.
So success before included knowing how to work on a big, complicated, long-term project from the start and getting it right perfectly, or at least extremely well the first time, and doing it all at once.
I was newly diagnosed just about a year and a half ago, and I had lived so many years doing the best I could. And the diagnosis really just opened a door to a whole host of resources that I didn't ever know was there for me. This course seemed to be the holy grail.
I've learned that I don't need anybody else to define what successful means to me, and that I am pretty darn successful on a daily basis.
The thing that I learned was I have a place in this world.
The thing I'm most proud of is that in the middle of some pretty intense chaos in my personal life and not knowing really what's going to happen in the future, having kind of the rug pulled out from under me, that I'm still here.
Now I feel a lot more comfortable with voicing things that I need, or being able to just talk about what is or is not working and not bringing too much judgment into that.
Now, success is planning what I can see as the first steps and starting.
I've found these great people that, it's so funny. When I first got in AA, there was this really annoying lady that would always say, I'm so happy to be around people that think like I do. And I was always like, I'm never going to say crap like that. But here I am going, I'm so happy to be around these people that think like I do. It's just such a relief to know that you're not alone, that you might not think like everybody around you, but you certainly think like a bunch of people that are in the world.
I'm most proud of the fact that I'm part of a group of people that are from all over different places, that we're able to come together and be real and open and vulnerable and put so much love and effort into each other, to help each other get to the other side. I think we've all come a long way, and I'm really proud to be a part of your group.
Registration is by invitation only, so that website again is coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our interest list to start your pre-registration process so you can join us tomorrow, December 21st at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern, or next week on Wednesday, December 28th, or Thursday, December 29th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern. These may be our last registration events, so don't wait. In ADHD reWired's coaching and accountability groups, you'll gain strategies to go from time blind to time wise. Plan your days, weeks, months, and learn how to use your calendar to reflect your priorities and your goals so you can live a more meaningful and intentional life. And you won't have to do any of this alone. So if it would be worth it to you to better understand your ADHD and learn alongside other like-wired brains who truly do understand the challenges we face every day, then join us at coachingrewired.com to get started. Come grow with us. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from Adult Study Hall, our virtual co-working and body doubling community for adults with ADHD, just like you and me, at adultstudyhall.com. It's free for the very first week and then only $19.99 a month after that. Whether you're preparing for the holidays and need to write your greeting cards or get started on DIYs, or if you want to get decluttered for the new year and want to close those loops on your to-do list, then join me and hundreds of other adults with ADHD who just get it at adultstudyhall.com, where you can get more done in our facilitated sessions or by joining our 24/7 drop-in room. That's adultstudyhall.com, where you can jump into our 24/7 drop-in room or any of our facilitated sessions so you can get unstuck and start crossing off your toughest to-dos. Give it a try. This is the body doubling community for adults with ADHD who want to get things done but don't want to do them alone. Remember, access to Adult Study Hall is only $19.99 a month and free for the first week to try. You can even cancel your membership at any time without any penalties. Come work with us. That's at adultstudyhall.com. All right, we are back with Brittany Berger. All right, so Brittany, right before the break, you were talking, you mentioned spoon theory. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, would you mind sharing what spoon theory is and why that's helpful for kind of all of our communities?
Sure. So spoon theory was originally an essay by Christine Miserandino. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It was basically her way of explaining her limited energy with lupus to a friend in a diner. And she was just like grasping for whatever prop she could use to explain. And there were all these extra spoons nearby. So she used that. But I also find that people unfamiliar with it sometimes understand it better using a dead cell phone battery version. So I'll explain it that way. So it's kind of like when you have a broken cell phone, you know that you can charge it all night. And sometimes you'll wake up and it will be fully charged. Sometimes it just will still be at 50%. Sometimes going from 100% to 20% takes 8 hours. Sometimes it takes 2. And when your phone's broken, you never really know. And that is kind of like life with an energy limited chronic illness. Everything is just really predictable. It's kind of like your recharging charge port is broken. Yeah. And I actually do in WorkWriter talk a lot about energy management. And I like to say that like spoon theory is kind of like the disabled community's kind of like thing, but I do use the term energy management to talk about it for everyone.
Well, I think what's great about the spoon theory idea, also for ADHD, is very parallel with executive functioning and looking at at executive functioning as a self-regulatory pool that as you use it, you lose it. While you can sort of restore it, if you tax too hard, it does not replenish as fast as we need it to. One of the things we work on in our coaching groups is helping people sort of pay attention to our patterns. If we typically have a couple really highly productive days, usually that's going to be followed by a day of like just not getting shit done. Right?
I call that an energy hangover.
Oh, I like that, an energy hangover. I did not know the history of the spoon theory, so that was also a cool thing to learn.
Yeah,
because I think that understanding that, first of all, like we can have this great routine, we can have these things like, but we have to be managing our energy, right? It's time is not what is managed. It's ourselves within the context of time that's managed.
Yeah, it's all about the effort and energy that we're putting into things. A great way that I like to explain it for people who don't really understand like how energy impacts our productivity is everyone has experienced that like sometimes an email that they had to write, they thought would take 5 minutes and instead it took like half an hour, because getting yourself into the right like mind space and, you know, doing the work, like you were probably doing that work when you didn't have a lot of social energy.
Okay. Earlier, you had mentioned Eat That Frog and 4 hours of deep work. which I think comes from, there's a couple places that comes from. So I wanted to kind of explore some of these things with you and some of maybe the nuances. And so I'm curious about how you kind of think about this. So let's start with Eat That Frog, which comes from, I think it was Brian Tracy.
Yeah, Brian Tracy wrote the book. I forget like which old historical dude originally said the quote the book was based off of. I'm tempted to say Ben Franklin just because so much of hustle culture traces back to him, but I don't know.
Okay, so when I've been in conversations with folks about this idea of when I ask them, like, are you an eat that frog kind of person or are you a momentum builder kind of person? Because everything always falls very neatly into just either or. There's sarcasm there. Okay, so what I tell people to really consider is if you think you're a momentum builder, look at what you actually do when you're doing that. Oh, I have to write this. I got to create this presentation, but I'm going to clean my desk first. Okay. Did the cleaning of the desk feel good? Did that now inspire you to now vacuum? Because it's been a while to vacuum. Well, now you vacuumed. Actually, you should dust the windowsills and that because the dust is going to fall. So I'm going to do, like, does one quick win dopamine hit lead to doing a bunch of other stuff that's still productive per se, or sometimes people call it pseudo productivity. So are you doing that? And then by the time you actually are done with all that, you don't have the energy to do the thing that you were trying to get yourself to do with momentum, right? Because I think for some people, what happens is they think they're momentum builders, but really they're good storytellers about procrastination to do the thing.
Yeah. I like to say, I like to have this thing that I like call it the first pancake theory. Okay. Are you familiar with like the idea that the first pancake in the batch will always be like the worst one?
It's true.
Because the pan is still getting to the right temperature. There's extra oil on the pan that needs to get soaked up and stuff like that. And yeah, I was reading a book that like talked about, I mean, it was a fiction book, but like a character was a chef and was explaining this theory. And I was just like, that's what I need to do in the morning. I need to have an hour that's like a throwaway where like I try to work, but not on my most important stuff, not on my hardest stuff. So I am doing things like on my to-do list, stuff that I would have needed to do anyway. But I don't put the hardest thing in the morning because also it takes me a long time to wake up in the morning. So when I would try to do the hardest thing first, or when I would tell myself to do the hardest thing first, I ended up just not doing anything. And so, yeah, I just kind of say like, what is just like easy stuff that would be a waste of time or too tedious to do like any other time of day. So like the first hour of my workday is usually like admin and updating spreadsheets and stuff like that, like things that I don't need a lot of energy to do because that hour is a throwaway, like the first pancake.
Oh, I need to have like all my executive function like online to look at a spreadsheet.
Well, I couldn't analyze it, but copying and pasting numbers from one into the other.
Oh, man. It is funny just how different skill sets people have. You know, I'm like, oh, that'd be even worse for me because like I will like invert numbers and I'll paste it in the wrong cell. And it's like, all of those things. I'm like, this is why I have an assistant because those are the things that are really hard for me to do. So you really are that momentum builder. Like, you need to kind of get some juices flowing, some wind under the belt to really, before you can sort of quote unquote eat that frog. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, it basically the idea is that if you start your day by eating a frog, everything else you do that day is going to be easier after that.
Yeah. It also just assumes that you have the willpower to eat a frog first thing in the morning.
Yeah, for sure.
I do not.
4 hours of deep work. Where are you pulling that one from?
I don't even know. It's just, I feel like it's something that's just like in the culture. And I recognize that it is not actually what Cal Newport recommends in his book, but like, it's just what people think that like deep work sections have to be intense and long.
Right.
And when people think of productivity, they think of long, intense work sessions. And this is something that I'm really trying to reframe my thinking around right now. Or like maybe Pomodoros don't need to be done like 3 or 4 or whatever. Like maybe I just do one 25-minute work session and then I take a break for a whole hour. But maybe that's what's working best for me right now.
And would you say that so many of the strategies you've used has been through a lot of iteration and experimentation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all of our brains are so different that, you know, what works for one person won't work for another. Everyone needs to find their own unique toolbox. You know, like I like to say that all of these different productivity techniques are just tools. And we all need to build our own toolbox full of some things that we use every day. And then maybe you have something that you only use every now and then. For example, you have that little like forest app on my phone. When I use that, like that's the big guns for me. Like when I open up that app, I am having some serious executive functioning troubles.
I have a couple of programs like Focus at Will is one where I'm like, okay, I need to focus here. And I'm just like doing everything other than what I need to be doing. So like, all right, let me get the Bose noise canceling headphones on. Let me get the, whatever channel it is that I will listen to and just kind of get in that groove. And it's sort of that experimentation to kind of figure out what works, because what works today might not work tomorrow. And it's this constant like variability in how we're showing up, what's working, what tools are helping us. Have you read the book, The One Thing?
No, but I'm familiar with like the concept in it.
So, it's one of the things we actually ask our coaching group members to read or listen to before group. And when we kind of discuss it, one of the things we discuss is, they talk about this idea of 4 hours of deep work a day. Like, I'm sorry, that is actually not even just like not ADHD friendly. Like most people's brains cannot do deep work for 4 consecutive hours.
Exactly.
The idea is about being intentional with a certain block of time. If that means 30 minutes, if you're putting on your calendar to do a certain thing for 30 minutes, great. If you can do it, but it's only 15 minutes, like meet yourself where you're at and then kind of just like incrementally, try to see if you can expand that if you can. Because it's that idea of time blocking, I think, is really helpful, but it's also flexible. I think it's important to think about our time as flexible. What do you think?
Definitely. I have been exploring a lot this year in my newsletter about the idea of time as a construct, and just like, can we reconstruct it, and learning about things like, I read the book, What Can a Body Do, about disability justice, and it talks about crip time and a less linear way of looking at time to accommodate disability. And then the book Unmasking Autism also talks about spiral time for neurodivergence, and just all of these different, less linear, more accommodating ways of looking at time. I'm really, really interested in exploring right now.
So for listeners who are kind of thinking they're maybe, I don't know, maybe they're newer to the ADHD diagnosis, or maybe they're newer and trying to figure out tools and strategies to figure this out, because there's also a lot of dopamine as well in the hustle culture. For people who might be trying to make that transition, or even thinking, well, maybe like that's you, but like I love working 100 hours a week. What do you say to those people?
I would say your cell phone might break. I was that person too. I saw a tweet once that I wish I could like remember who said it, because it was so profound, and it does it just an injustice by saying I saw a tweet. It was about how when you put in more than 100% effort today, that's not coming from nowhere. That's an energy loan from your future self. And so the way that I kind of see my whole like big burnout was like, oh yeah, like the first 25 years of my life where I worked constantly, like that was borrowing work hours from my future self. And that's why I have such limited capacity now. We can only work so much. Something that I don't think I understood until recently is how straining even just like desk work and quote unquote knowledge work is. I used to tell myself like, oh, it's not like I'm on my feet or doing manual labor. I'm a writer. Like I just sitting here, I can do this for 12 hours. But then I actually learned how much like energy goes into thinking. And I was like, oh crap.
Absolutely. No,
yeah. And so I would say like, if you love your work, the best thing you can do is go about it in a sustainable way. I do still really love my work. And that's one of the reasons that I manage my energy carefully and pace myself so that I don't burn out and have to go a really long time without it again.
So what I'll be curious to explore is, what are the structures that you've put in place to sort of ensure that you're not taxing your EF too much? But we do need to take a quick break. So we will get to that after the break. We will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from our patrons who give at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. If you find value in this show and want to support our work, then consider becoming a patron by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. How does ad-free episodes of this show sound to you? You can get that as a perk starting at just $5 a month. And I want to give a big welcome to Jahane J and Mark W, who both recently became patrons. thank you so much. When you go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon, you'll be able to get access to ad-free episodes of this show. And at $10 a month, you can get ad-free episodes and the recording of our monthly coaching calls. Then at $25 a month, you can join me for our monthly coaching call every fourth Tuesday of the month. However, if you are listening to this in December, normally our monthly coaching call would be next week. We are taking a break for the holidays, so our next monthly coaching call is on Tuesday, January 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern. So if you want some extra support, consider becoming a patron at the $25 a month level and join me on Tuesday, January 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern. Your support lets us do what we love. So if you find value in this show and want to support our mission to make the world a little more ADHD friendly with one ADHD story at a time, consider becoming a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Remember, perks start at just $5 a month and support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Thank you and happy holidays. If you want to gain new strategies and tools to manage your ADHD and you want to stay up to date with our show notes and weekly episodes, then make sure to hit subscribe or follow by going to ADHDrewired.com/podcast or hit those subscribe or follow buttons in your favorite podcast player. And whether you're new to the podcast or you're a longtime listener, if you haven't already, we would love if you'd be able to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this show. Your reviews help this show reach more listeners around the world. And don't forget to check out our other shows that we have on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network, from ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan to Hacking Your ADHD with Lil Curb and ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens. And if you go to ADHDrewired.com/podcast network, you'll find all of our shows there, including the 2 new shows that will be joining us soon, hosted by ADHD Rewired coaches Kat Hoyer and Kristen Martz. Then you can join me and the rest of the ADHD Rewired team for our monthly live Q&A that we do every second Tuesday of the month. Our next live Q&A is on Tuesday, January 10th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 Eastern. So mark your calendars and head on over to ADHDrewired.com/events to register so you can join us live on Zoom. That's ADHDrewired.com to find show notes, our other shows, our coaching groups, our events, and more. That's all at ADHDrewired.com. Thanks for listening. All right, we are back with Brittany Berger. All right, so tell us about, how do you do this? If you've had, 25 years of your life where like hustle, let's work hard, let's, do everything we have to do to succeed. And then you hit that wall and you realize you can't do this anymore. So knowing that you can't do this anymore and wanting to create a life that works for you isn't just a decision. It requires setting up your environment, setting up your routines. It changes how you live. How are you doing this?
I want to give a huge thanks to my partner. He's been really really in all of it. And like I said, I have a fair amount of financial privilege in not having to make money my deciding factor when deciding how to go about my work. I didn't always have that, and most people don't have that. So I do want to recognize that. But I also think that a lot of us maybe miscalculate how much leeway and stuff we really have in our work. It was only after the fact, after I left my jobs, that I realized how much more I probably could have been accommodated if I understood myself and what I needed. I never would have even thought to ask for things, not because I didn't think I deserved them or I didn't think that my employer would give them to me, but just because I didn't know that I needed them. It was actually my employer at one point who suggested, do you want to work from home? Because we were working in a shared co-working space. And I was very clearly very agitated by how noisy it was all the time. So I do think that being honest about the way you work and why, I worked in an open office and I guess I never really even just thought about if that worked for me enough to say, can I work differently?
And in hindsight, what are some things that you wish, knowing what you know now, that you wish you would have asked for?
I wish I would have asked for more flexible hours. Actually, after the fact, after I left my job, multiple people in the department at the same place, they eventually went down to part-time to do other things in their life. And I was I could have done that. And I could have just gone down to part-time. I didn't know that was an option. I thought that if I wasn't willing to put in all 60 plus hours of work, that it was that or nothing. And I do think that like there probably would have been consequences for doing the equivalent of like quiet quitting or whatever it's called now. But I do think that I didn't need to necessarily, cut myself off from my old life so drastically and completely. I could have been a bit more of a sequence of baby steps, which I talk about being good as a way to adapt to change. And then there I went.
Just fully into something different.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people also, this was an issue that I didn't realize I had in my job before that one, but flexible hours where I knew I worked better at night. And so I would basically like do busy work and stuff in the office all day. And then I would go home and I would do my writing assignments that I was supposed to have been doing in the office because I know I work better. But like I never told anyone that and was like, hey, if I work at night, maybe I can like leave an hour early or something like that. Like they might have said no, but like it just never even occurred to me to ask. But yeah, some of the best things that you can do is like shifting your work hours or locations to things that work better for you. Those have been like the two best things for me. I don't work in the mornings anymore.
So what time do you start your work day? What time does it start for you?
It's very flexible day to day because again, my energy and health is very unpredictable. But I usually do a work session in the early afternoon for a few hours. And then again, I really love writing like really late at night. I'm a night owl. So once my partner goes to bed, I usually come back into my office and do a little writing for an hour or two at like midnight.
And that works for you.
Yeah.
So what are some other sort of structures or strategies you put into place that are allowing you to work brighter?
I'm very big on like personal boundaries and limits. I know
Please
that I feel like I've heard
because that's so important.
I feel like you've talked about the 4 questioner or the 4 tendencies before,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Gretchen Rubin stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a questioner. So like if a rule makes sense to me, I will live and die by it. And so I realized I just need to make up my own rules for my life. It's kind of like the equivalent of when people talk about how minimalists have the same of every t-shirt or something like that. I don't go that extreme, but like my wardrobe's very uniform. I know that I wear soft t-shirts on top and hoodies, and I know that I wear like soft joggers or yoga pants. Like it's a flexible uniform, but it's a uniform. I like giving myself menus and like options, but within structure. I kind of theme my days. And so it's like, I don't need to work today, but if I'm going to work today, I'm going to work on this area of my business. And that also kind of creates containers for all the stuff like I don't want to do. Like it's much easier to not reply to an email I get on Monday if I know that Wednesday is my email reply day and it's a reply that can wait until Wednesday. So I'm big on that and like creating containers for things.
What do you do to go back to email? So if you see an email Monday that you're like, I'm going to reply that on Wednesday, how do you actually manage that?
I have a to reply tag, and then I have like a task every Wednesday that's like email day. So I like creating containers for things. Like every day I do what I call a productivity power hour. And that's just like all of the random admin, like when I see something throughout my day, like a tech problem that needs to be fixed, instead of letting myself get distracted with it in the moment, I just write it down for my next power hour.
So it sounds like you do a lot of batching.
Yeah, but like on a micro level. I'm actually really not a fan of like the way batching is worked a lot. Cause like I batch like really, really tiny tasks, but like batching content, writing more than one blog post at a time. Like I don't even write one blog post all at one time.
I guess because what I was wondering about, because clearly you've given a lot of thought to a lot of these productivity ideas. Yeah. I'm just kind of curious about like the way you think about like batching and how you sort of bend batching to work for you.
Oh, yeah. So my theory on batching is that people should only try to batch their like lowest energy work. And I think a lot of people just think that batching anything is good and you want to batch everything as much as possible.
What's your thinking behind that about why it should be your lowest energy work?
Because otherwise you're like creating a marathon for yourself. If you have a really, really draining task, like how are you going to feel after you do it 5 times in a row? So again, it comes back to avoiding those energy hangovers.
One of the issues that I've had with batching is that like if I have because I've tried batching, but if I have, let's say every Friday is my like, I don't know, let's say it's my admin day and my brain just not working with me on Friday, then that means I'm going to go 2 weeks until I have actually addressed all that admin stuff. And since I don't even like admin stuff to begin with, now I have even more stuff. So now, even if my EF is better than it was the week prior, now I have a bigger pile of shit that I got to look at. So then the procrastination kicks in, and then it's like, oh man. So my only issue with batching is that it feels like it counts on your brain being reliably on at specific days or times.
Yeah, that too. And I like to talk about, like, again, like flexible batching, micro batching, like, again, like just the short emails. Again, I'm a writer in the content space. So a lot of people talk about batching content, and people talk about writing all of their social media content for the month in one sitting. And I could just never do that. But I might batch once a week. That I could do in usually like 30 minutes. I like batching small tasks together, but I'm not someone who can really do marathon work sessions anymore. Like, I take a break like every 45 minutes.
What do you do for breaks?
Usually just like walk around my apartment. Like, I have my Apple Watch and I get my stand hour in. Usually try to tidy up a little, or I'll watch, I can measure my life in sitcom episodes, 22 minutes. That's how long they are when you're streaming them with no commercials.
Are you able to actually stop when you want it to stop?
Sometimes. I actually find TV to be a great background noise for me to work to, especially for stuff that's kind of like underwhelming. If I'm watching something that's familiar to me and that I've seen it before, I don't need to pay a ton of attention. It adds just like an extra little bit of like stimulation to the work. I like to say that like I'm interested enough that like my brain registers it, but doesn't try to pay attention. And so like shows that I've seen a million times, I could work to them. I fall asleep to them. That's like one of my tools.
That's great that you've clearly done a lot of experimentation, kind of out of necessity though. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that's where a lot of this comes from is, for a lot of people, these kinds of tools and strategies can be really helpful, like whether or not you have ADHD or neurodivergent. But I think when you do have neurodivergence, that this isn't optional. Like, if you don't want to be sick your entire life and be constantly stressed out, and worse, like, you have to figure this stuff out. And I think that finding community. So, because I think the other thing that can happen, especially if you're sort of alone in the journey, is you start to do this experimentation. And then the internal story becomes, oh, I'm so selfish because I'm having to create all these rules for myself and these different things that really are going to keep me from doing what I want to do, or allow me to do what I want to do. But it's not. Taking care of yourself is one of the most important things we do, not just for ourselves, but for everyone we care about.
Yeah. Another big deciding factor in me deciding to leave my job was me really fully realizing how my constant burnout and chronic illness flare-ups, the toll that was taking on my family. Once I really started to see that, that's when things changed. Because I was like, oh, I don't care, but they do. Yeah. I forget what else I was going to say.
Do you still feel sometimes that you're not doing enough? Is that internal?
Yeah. The feeling has not gone away, but like I said about something else earlier, I'm more aware of it and know how to deal with it when it comes up.
And I think that that's a piece that is I don't see talked about enough in the conversation around like toxic productivity and hustle culture. Is okay. So we're on board. We get it. Like, less is probably more. So once we make that shift, it doesn't mean the internal dialogue is going to all of a sudden like be like, great, thanks, brain. Like, this is right. If we are used to working insane hours, our brain's going to tell us like, what are we doing? You need to be working. And so I think just normalizing that.
Yeah. And especially when productivity is tied so much to our livelihood in this society, it's hard not to worry and stress a little bit about it. I mean, it probably wouldn't even be good to not care at all unless you were incredibly privileged. A lot of us don't have the luxury not to worry about it at all. So it is really important to find the healthy relationship with it.
What do you think about like sprints in terms of like hustling and sprints?
I mean, I've seen it work for some people, like some like companies or self-employed people that, maybe work for like 6 weeks on and then 2 weeks off or something like that and have really intense. But for me personally, I have found that small, slow, steady works much better, making a little bit of small progress every day. Also, it's really hard for me to focus on just one project at a time that intensely. So I think that it works for my ADHD to also not be so focused on one thing at a time, because there's this concept called structured procrastination, where it's like you have multiple options of quote unquote productive things to do. So if you don't feel like one, you can do the others. In addition to Work Brighter, I do some freelancing. And so, I alternate between the 2 days of them so that I'm never just like working on the same project all day, every day for like a whole week. But I mean, I can work for some people and awesome for them. We should all be doing the things that work for us.
100% agreed. If people want to learn more about you and kind of what you do, where can people kind of learn more about you?
They can go to workbrighter.co, or Instagram handle is workbrighter.
Brittany Berger, thank you so much. This was a really fun conversation, and I really enjoyed this. Is there any final thoughts you want to leave listeners with?
That your productivity is not tied to your worth.
That's a good place to end. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD reWired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD reWired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD reWired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD reWired podcast network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD reWired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinating on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great. Starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD reWired. click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tibbers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.